The rainwater dripping from Paige Williams's second-hand coat pooled on the polished marble floor of the Gramercy Hotel lobby, and she knew the doorman was watching her with obvious distaste. But she had nowhere else to go at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday night after losing her waitressing job for refusing to serve drinks to a table of handsy Wall Street types. She clutched her canvas bag tighter against her chest, feeling the weight of her last $43 in crumpled bills pressing against her ribs through the worn fabric, when a man's voice broke through her spiraling thoughts. "Excuse me, are you all right?" Paige looked up to find a tall man standing a few feet away, his dark hair slightly damp from the storm outside, wearing an expensive-looking navy suit that probably cost more than 3 months of her rent. His eyes were a striking shade of green that seemed genuinely concerned rather than judgmental, which was more than she could say for anyone else who had looked at her tonight. "I'm fine," she said automatically, then realized how unconvincing she must sound with mascara probably running down her cheeks and her hair plastered to her skull. "Just waiting for the rain to slow down." The man glanced toward the windows where sheets of water were still hammering against the glass with no signs of stopping. "That might be a while. Can I buy you a coffee? There's a cafe just through there." He gestured toward the hotel's interior restaurant, which looked warm and inviting with its soft lighting and leather booths. Paige hesitated. She had been taught not to accept things from strangers, especially men in expensive suits who probably wanted something in return. But she was cold and tired, and the thought of a hot drink was almost overwhelming in its appeal. "I don't need charity," she said, lifting her chin. Something flickered across his face, almost like amusement but gentler. "I'm not offering charity. I'm offering coffee to someone who looks like they've had a rough night. I'm Yates Norton, by the way. Paige Williams." She studied him for another moment, then made a decision. "Okay, coffee sounds good." They settled into a corner booth, and Paige wrapped her hands around the ceramic mug the server brought, letting the warmth seep into her frozen fingers. Yates ordered coffee for himself and didn't comment when she also asked for a sandwich, even though she tried to keep her voice casual about it. "So what brings you to the Gramercy on a night like this?" Yates asked, his tone conversational rather than interrogating. "Bad timing," Paige said. "I worked at a restaurant a few blocks from here. Worked past tense as of about 2 hours ago." She took a sip of coffee, savoring the rich taste. "My landlord is probably going to love hearing that news when rent comes due next week." "What happened?" She could have lied, could have made up something that sounded better, but there was something about the way Yates looked at her with those steady green eyes that made her want to tell the truth. "Some customers thought waitress meant they could put their hands wherever they wanted. I disagreed." "My manager felt my disagreement was bad for business." Yates's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Your manager was an idiot." "My manager was protecting his bottom line," Paige said. "Those guys were big tippers. I'm just a waitress who can be replaced tomorrow." She realized how bitter she sounded and forced a smile. "Sorry, you probably don't want to hear me complain about my life." "Actually, I'd like to hear more," Yates said. "What do you want to do, besides waitressing?" The question caught her off guard. Most people assumed waitressing was all she was capable of, that she hadn't wanted or tried for anything better. "I want to be a marine biologist," she admitted. "I know that sounds stupid coming from someone who can barely afford to eat, let alone go back to school, but I used to be enrolled at NYU. I had scholarships and everything. Then my mom got sick, and I had to drop out to take care of her and work full-time, and by the time she passed away 2 years ago, I had so much debt from her medical bills that going back to school felt impossible." "That's not stupid," Yates said firmly. "That's loving your mother and doing what you had to do. There's nothing stupid about that. Paige felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. She couldn't remember the last time someone had said something so kind to her without wanting anything in return. "Thank you," she managed. They talked for over an hour, long enough for Paige's clothes to mostly dry and for the storm outside to finally ease into a steady drizzle. Yates told her he worked in real estate, which Paige figured was probably code for something more impressive based on the quality of his watch and shoes, but she didn't press. He had an easy way of talking that made her forget about all the stress of her life, and he listened when she spoke like her words actually mattered. When she finally glanced at the clock and realized how late it was, she stood reluctantly. "I should get going." "Thank you for the coffee and the sandwich, and for listening. Let me give you a ride home," Yates offered, rising with her. "It's still raining. I can take the subway, it's fine." "Paige." He said her name gently and she looked up at him. "Please let me give you a ride. It's late and you've had a terrible night, and I promise I'm not some creep. I just want to make sure you get home safely." She wanted to refuse on principle, but the thought of waiting for the subway and then walking 3 blocks in the rain to her apartment made her reconsider. "Okay, thank you." His car turned out to be a sleek black sedan with leather seats, and that new car smell that Paige vaguely remembered from before her life had fallen apart. The driver who appeared seemed unsurprised to be called at midnight, which made Paige wonder exactly what kind of real estate Yates worked in. During the drive to her apartment in Queens, they talked more, and Paige found herself laughing at one of his stories about a disastrous property showing where the pipes had burst mid-tour. When they pulled up outside her building with its chipped paint and flickering streetlight, she felt a wave of embarrassment at the contrast between his world and hers. "Thank you again," she said, reaching for the door handle. "Really, tonight was awful until I met you." "Paige, wait." Yates pulled out his wallet and extracted a business card. "I know you said you don't need charity, and this isn't that, but I own some properties that need management oversight. You seem smart and responsible. If you're interested, call me tomorrow and we can talk about a job that pays better than waitressing." Paige looked at the card in his outstretched hand, suspicious and hopeful in equal measure. "Why would you offer me a job? You don't know anything about me." "I know you stood up for yourself even though it cost you your income. I know you put your mother before your dreams. I know you're resilient and honest. That's more than I know about most people I hire." She took the card, running her thumb over the embossed lettering. "I'll think about it. That's all I ask." He smiled, and Paige felt something flutter in her chest that she firmly told herself was just gratitude and exhaustion. She got out of the car and hurried into her building, not looking back until she was in her tiny studio apartment. Only then did she really examine the card. Yates Norton, President and CEO, Norton Property Group. Below that was a phone number and an address in Manhattan that Paige recognized as being in one of the most expensive areas of the city. She looked up Norton Property Group on her phone, and her eyes widened as she scrolled through articles about one of the largest real estate development companies on the East Coast, worth hundreds of millions of dollars. There were photos of Yates at charity galas and business conferences, always looking polished and confident, and Paige realized with a sinking feeling that she had spent the evening casually chatting with someone who existed in a completely different stratosphere from her. She should throw the card away. Nothing good could come from getting involved with someone that wealthy, that far removed from the realities of her life. But she kept thinking about the way he had looked at her, like she was a person worth listening to rather than just another struggling nobody in New York City. And she desperately needed a job. The next morning, Paige stared at her phone for 20 minutes before finally calling the number on the card. A polite secretary answered and put her through to Yates almost immediately, which surprised her. "Paige, I'm glad you called," Yates said, sounding genuinely pleased. "Are you free this afternoon? I'd like to show you one of the properties and discuss the position." They agreed to meet at 2 o'clock at an address in Brooklyn. Paige spent an hour trying to make herself look professional with her limited wardrobe, finally settling on black pants and a cream blouse that were only slightly wrinkled. She took the subway across the city, her stomach churning with nerves. The building turned out to be a beautifully restored brownstone with a discreet bronze plaque that read, "Norton Property Group, Brooklyn Division." Yates met her at the door, dressed more casually than the night before in dark jeans and a gray sweater that made his green eyes even more striking. "Come in," he said warmly. "Let me show you around." The building housed offices for property managers who oversaw Norton Property Group's residential buildings in Brooklyn and Queens. Yates explained that they needed someone to coordinate between the managers, handle tenant concerns that required executive attention, and oversee maintenance scheduling for multiple properties. It requires organizational skills and the ability to deal with people calmly even when they are upset, Yates said as they walked through the bright, modern offices. "The hours are normal business hours, Monday through Friday, and the salary is $65,000 a year plus benefits." Paige stopped walking and stared at him. $65,000 for coordinating property managers. "That's the market rate for this position," Yates said. "Is that acceptable?" "Acceptable." That was more than double what she had made waitressing. That was enough to actually save money to start paying down her debt, to maybe eventually think about going back to school. "That's very acceptable," she managed. "But I don't have experience in property management. You have customer service experience, which is most of what this job is. And you can learn the rest." Yates leaned against a desk, watching her carefully. "I meant what I said last night, Paige. I think you'd be good at this." She wanted to ask why he was really doing this, whether he expected something from her beyond work, whether this was all too good to be true. But she also needed this opportunity desperately, and something in his steady gaze made her want to trust him. "When would I start?" she asked. "Monday, if that works for you. I'll have HR send over the paperwork today." Paige felt like she was in a dream as she shook his hand and thanked him. As she turned to leave, Yates called her name. "Paige, would you have dinner with me tomorrow night? Not business, just dinner." Her heart did that fluttering thing again. "Like a date?" "Yes, like a date, if you're interested." She knew she should say no. He was her new boss, and he was clearly wealthy in a way that made her uncomfortable, and mixing personal and professional was always a bad idea. But when she opened her mouth, what came out was, "Yes, I'd like that." His smile was worth every bit of her nervousness. The next evening, Yates picked her up in that same black sedan, and Paige tried not to feel self-conscious about the fact that she was wearing the only dress she owned that didn't have stains or tears. It was a simple navy dress that had been nice 5 years ago, and she had paired it with cheap ballet flats because her only heels had broken months ago. "You look beautiful," Yates said when she got in the car, and he sounded like he meant it. The restaurant he took her to was the kind of place Paige had only seen in movies, with white tablecloths and candles and a wine list that probably cost more than her monthly grocery budget. She felt desperately out of place, especially when she noticed other women in the restaurant wearing jewelry that sparkled under the lights and designer dresses she could identify from magazine advertisements. "Is this okay?" Yates asked, noticing her discomfort. "We can go somewhere else if you'd prefer." "No, it's lovely," Paige said, forcing herself to relax. "I'm just not used to places like this." "Neither was I growing up," Yates said. "My parents were both teachers. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens until I was 16. Paige looked at him in surprise. Really? Really? I got into real estate by chance when I was in college. I was working as a building superintendent to pay for school, and I noticed the owner was neglecting necessary repairs. I approached him with a proposal to take over management in exchange for reduced rent for the tenants and a small percentage of the profits. He laughed at me, but I was persistent. Eventually, he let me try it. Within a year, tenant retention was up, the building's value increased, and I had proven myself. He became my mentor and helped me get started in the business, but I remember what it's like to count every dollar and worry about making rent. How long ago was that? Paige asked. 15 years. I'm 33 now. He smiled slightly. I've been very fortunate, but I try not to forget where I came from. They talked through dinner about their childhoods, their families, their dreams. Paige learned that Yates's mother had passed away from cancer 5 years ago, that his father had remarried and was happily retired in Florida, that Yates had a younger sister who taught at an elementary school in Boston. She told him about growing up in upstate New York, about her father leaving when she was 10, about her mother's strength and humor even as she got sick. She would have liked you, Paige said, then blushed. Sorry, that's probably weird to say on a first date. It's not weird. It's one of the nicest things anyone has said to me. Yates reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. I really like you, Paige. I know the circumstances of how we met were unusual, and I know there's a disparity between our financial situations that probably makes you uncomfortable. But I don't care about any of that. I care that you're smart and kind and brave. I care that talking to you feels easier than talking to anyone else I've met in years. Paige's heart was pounding. I like you too, she admitted. But Yates, you're a millionaire CEO and I'm a broke almost college dropout who is about to be evicted from a studio apartment in Queens. You have to see how those two things don't exactly match up. Why don't they match up? Because I have more money. That's just circumstances, Paige. It doesn't define who we are as people. Easy to say when you're the one with the money, Paige said, but without bitterness. Look, I'm not saying I don't want to see where this goes. I do. But I need you to understand that the money thing is complicated for me. I've spent the last few years barely surviving, and you probably spend more on a single dinner than I make in a week. That's a big gap. Then let's take things slowly, Yates said. Let's get to know each other without pressure. And Paige, the job offer is real and separate from this. If you decide you don't want to date me, you still have the position. I want you to know that. She believed him, which was perhaps the most surprising thing of all. Okay, slowly sounds good. Paige started working at Norton Property Group the following Monday, and to her relief and slight disappointment, Yates maintained complete professionalism at the office. He introduced her to the team, made sure she had everything she needed, and then stepped back to let her learn the job without hovering. The work itself turned out to be challenging but rewarding, and Paige discovered she was good at calming upset tenants and coordinating between different departments. Outside of work, she and Yates went on dates. He took her to a comedy show in the Village, to a small Italian restaurant in the Bronx that he swore had the best pasta in the city, to a movie in a restored old theater in Brooklyn. He never tried to overwhelm her with expensive gestures, seeming to understand instinctively that she would hate that. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, and Paige felt herself falling for him a little more each time they were together. 3 weeks after they started dating, Yates invited her to a charity gala his company was sponsoring. I know it's not your scene, but I'd really like you to come with me, he said. I have to be there for work, and honestly, Those events are incredibly boring when I don't have someone interesting to talk to. Paige immediately panicked about what to wear. She couldn't show up to a gala in her 5-year-old navy dress, but she also couldn't afford anything appropriate for an event like that. She was trying to figure out if she could discreetly ask her coworker Rita for advice when a package arrived at her apartment 2 days before the gala. Inside was a dress, a gorgeous deep green silk that felt like water between her fingers, along with a pair of simple but elegant heels and a note in Yates's handwriting. "I saw this and thought of you. Please don't be mad. You can return it if you want, but I'd love to see you wear it. Why?" Paige stared at the dress for a long time, torn between gratitude and frustration. She knew Yates meant well, but accepting expensive gifts from him felt like crossing a line she wasn't ready to cross. She called him immediately. "I can't accept this," she said when he answered. "Hello to you too." She could hear the amusement in his voice. "Why not?" "Because it's too much, Yates. This dress probably costs more than my rent." "It's just a dress, Paige. You need something to wear to the gala and I have the means to provide it. Why is that a problem?" "Because I don't want to be the woman who needs her rich boyfriend to buy her clothes," Paige said, then realized what she had said. "Sorry, I mean the guy I'm dating. I don't know if we're at the boyfriend-girlfriend stage yet." "I'd like to be," Yates said quietly. "And Paige, you're not a woman who needs me to buy you clothes. You're a woman who has spent the last few years dealing with circumstances that weren't your fault, who is working hard to rebuild her life, and who I happen to care about very much. Letting me buy you a dress isn't a character flaw. It's just letting someone who cares about you do something nice for you." Paige felt tears prickling at her eyes, frustrated with herself for being emotional. "I just don't want you to think I'm with you because of your money. I have never once thought that. You fought me on accepting the job. You refuse to let me pay for dinner half the time even though I can see it stretches your budget. You get uncomfortable when I try to do anything that costs more than about $50. If anything, I wish you'd let me spoil you a little more." He paused. "Please wear the dress. Not because you need me to provide it, but because I want to see you in it, and because showing up to these events in the right clothes makes everything easier. Think of it as armor for dealing with a bunch of boring rich people." Despite herself, Paige laughed. "When you put it that way." "Is that a yes?" "Yes, thank you, Yates, really. You're welcome, and Paige, I'm glad you called me your boyfriend. That's definitely what I want to be." The night of the gala, Paige spent an hour getting ready in her tiny bathroom, doing her makeup carefully and pinning her hair up in a style she hoped looked elegant. When she finally put on the dress, she barely recognized herself in the mirror. The green silk brought out the hazel flecks in her eyes, and the cut was perfect for her figure without being revealing. Yates's expression when he picked her up made all her anxiety worth it. "Paige," he breathed, "you're stunning." "The dress is doing most of the work," she said, but she was smiling. "The dress is very nice," Yates agreed, "but it's the woman wearing it who is stunning." The gala was held in a museum, with cocktails in the sculpture garden followed by dinner and dancing in the main hall. Paige felt overwhelmed the moment they walked in, surrounded by women dripping in diamonds and men in tuxedos that probably cost more than a used car. She held tighter to Yates's arm, and he bent to murmur in her ear, "You belong here just as much as anyone else. Don't let them make you feel otherwise." Easy for him to say. He moved through the crowd with easy confidence, greeting people by name, introducing Paige simply as his girlfriend without any explanation or apology. Some people seemed curious about her. Others barely gave her a second glance, and a few women looked at her with barely concealed disdain, clearly judging her as not fitting in. During cocktail hour, Paige found herself cornered by a tall blonde woman wearing enough diamonds to fund a small country. "You're with Yates Norton, right?" the woman said. "I'm Celeste Hartwick. My husband is on the board of directors for Norton Property Group." "Nice to meet you," Paige said politely. "How long have you two been together? I don't remember seeing you at any of the other events." "A few weeks." Paige could feel the woman assessing her, looking for weaknesses. "And what do you do?" "I work in property management for Norton Property Group." Celeste's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. "Oh, how convenient. So he's your boss and your boyfriend. That must make things interesting." Before Paige could respond, Yates appeared at her side, sliding an arm around her waist. "Celeste, how nice to see you. Is your husband here tonight?" "He's around somewhere," Celeste said, her tone cooling. "I was just getting to know your girlfriend." "She's very different from the women you usually date." "Yes, she is," Yates agreed. "She's genuine and kind, which is refreshingly different." Celeste's smile sharpened. "How sweet. Well, I should go find my husband. Enjoy your evening." As she walked away, Paige let out a breath. That was uncomfortable. "Celeste is always uncomfortable," Yates said. "Don't let her get to you. She's just jealous because she's miserable in her marriage and can't stand seeing other people happy." During dinner, Paige found herself seated next to an older gentleman who turned out to be much more pleasant than Celeste. His name was Walter Montgomery, and he owned a chain of boutique hotels along the East Coast. They talked about marine biology, and he shared stories about funding ocean conservation projects through his hotel foundation. By the time dessert arrived, Paige had almost forgotten to be nervous. "You've got a good one there," Walter said to Yates, nodding toward Paige. "Smart and passionate. Don't mess it up." "I don't intend to," Yates said, smiling at Paige in a way that made her stomach flip. When the dancing started, Yates led her onto the floor. Paige had never been much of a dancer, but Yates guided her through the steps with patient confidence, and after a few minutes she relaxed into it. "Thank you for coming tonight," Yates said, his hand warm against the small of her back. "I know this isn't easy for you." "It's not as bad as I thought it would be," Paige admitted, "though I could do without people like Celeste." "There are always going to be people like Celeste, unfortunately. People who judge others based on money and status instead of character, but their opinions don't matter. You know who you are, and I know who you are. That's what matters." Paige looked up at him, at this man who had somehow walked into her life at her lowest moment and proceeded to treat her with more kindness and respect than she had experienced in years. "I'm falling in love with you," she said, the words escaping before she could stop them. "I know it's only been a few weeks and that probably sounds crazy, but it's true." Yates stopped dancing, right there in the middle of the floor, and cupped her face in his hands. "It's not crazy. I'm falling in love with you too. I have been since that first night when you were dripping rainwater on the hotel floor and still managed to hold your head high." He kissed her then, soft and sweet, and Paige forgot about everyone watching, forgot about the difference in their bank accounts, forgot about everything except the feeling of his lips on hers, and the knowledge that this was real. The next few months passed in a blur of happiness that Paige had to keep reminding herself was real. She continued to excel at her job, earning praise from her supervisors and respect from her coworkers. She and Yates grew closer, spending nearly every evening together when he wasn't traveling for work. He met her small circle of friends, fitting in easily with their casual dinners and movie nights. She met his sister during a weekend trip to Boston, and Rebecca Norton welcomed her with open arms and embarrassing stories about Yates as a teenager. But the money issue continued to linger in the background like an unresolved chord. Yates never flaunted his wealth deliberately, but it was impossible to ignore. He owned a penthouse apartment in Manhattan with floor-to-ceiling windows and furniture that looked like it belonged in an art gallery. He flew first class when he traveled for business. He mentioned donating to charity like it was buying coffee, giving away amounts that made Paige's head spin. She was still living in her studio apartment in Queens, still taking the subway everywhere, still carefully budgeting every dollar even though her new salary had made her life significantly easier. The gap between their lifestyles felt like a chasm that she didn't know how to cross. Things came to a head 4 months into their relationship when Yates asked her to go with him to his father's wedding anniversary party in Florida. "My dad has been asking to meet you," Yates said, "and it would be a good chance for you to get away from the city for a weekend. We can stay a few extra days, make a vacation out of it." "I can't afford a trip to Florida right now," Paige said, hating how the words sounded. "I'm trying to save up to pay off some of my mother's medical debt, and plane tickets and hotels are expensive. Paige, I would pay for the trip." "You know that." "I know, and that's the problem." Paige set down her coffee cup with more force than necessary. "I can't keep letting you pay for everything, Yates. It's not fair to you and it makes me feel terrible." "Why does it make you feel terrible?" "I want to do these things with you, and I have the means to make it happen." "Why is that a problem?" "Because it is." Paige stood up, frustrated and unable to articulate exactly why she felt so uncomfortable. "Because you're this successful millionaire and I'm just barely getting my life together, and every time you pay for something or buy me something, it reminds me of how unequal we are." Yates stood too, his jaw tight. "We're not unequal, Paige. We have different financial situations, but that doesn't make you less than me. Maybe not to you, but to everyone else. To people like Celeste at that gala. To your business associates who probably wonder what you're doing with someone like me. I'm definitely less than you in their eyes." "Since when do you care what people like Celeste think?" "I don't, but Yates, don't you see? This isn't sustainable. We're building a relationship on this foundation where you have all the power because you have all the money. What happens when you get tired of having to pay for everything? What happens when you meet someone who can actually afford to be part of your world?" Yates looked at her with something like hurt in his green eyes. "Is that really what you think of me? That I'm so shallow I would base my relationship decisions on money?" "No, I don't think you're shallow. I think you're wonderful and kind and generous, but I also think that eventually the reality of our situations is going to matter. You're too rich for me, Yates. We live in completely different worlds and I don't know how to bridge that gap." There was a long silence. Yates shoved his hands in his pockets, staring out the window of her apartment. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet. "Class has never mattered to me, Paige. Not when I met you, not now, not ever. I don't see you as someone who is less than me because you have less money. I see you as my equal in every way that actually matters. But if you can't see that, if you're always going to feel like there's this insurmountable gap between us, then maybe you're right. Maybe this won't work." He left after that, and Paige spent the rest of the evening crying into her pillow, feeling like she had ruined the best thing in her life, but not knowing how to fix it. They didn't talk for 3 days. Paige went to work and kept her head down, throwing herself into tenant requests and maintenance schedules to avoid thinking about the ache in her chest. On the 4th day, Rita from accounting cornered her in the break room. "Okay, what is going on between you and the boss?" Rita asked bluntly. "The man looks like someone kicked his puppy and you're not much better." "We had a fight," Paige admitted. "About money." Rita raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess, you have a problem with him having so much of it. How did you know?" "Because I've worked here for 8 years, and I've watched Yates Norton carefully keep his distance from romantic relationships because every woman he dated seemed more interested in his bank account than in him. Then you came along, and for the first time, I saw him actually happy. But you're so busy being worried about his money that you can't see what everyone else can see. What's that? That he loves you for exactly who you are, and he doesn't give a damn about the financial disparity between you. The only person who cares about that is you. Rita crossed her arms. Look, I get it. I grew up poor, and there's always this voice in the back of your head telling you that you're not good enough for nice things or successful people. But that voice is a liar, Paige. You deserve good things. You deserve someone who treats you well and wants to share his life with you. Don't let your pride or your insecurity ruin that. After Rita left, Paige sat in the break room for a long time, thinking about everything that had been said. Rita was right, she realized. This wasn't really about Yates or his money. This was about her own feelings of inadequacy, her fear that she wasn't enough, her inability to accept that someone could want her despite the mess her life had been. She had to fix this. That evening, Paige went to Yates's penthouse. She had only been there a handful of times, always feeling out of place among the expensive furniture and modern art. The doorman recognized her and let her up without calling first, which either meant Yates had told him to or the man was very perceptive. Yates opened the door in jeans and an old t-shirt, his hair messy like he had been running his hands through it. His expression when he saw her was guarded but hopeful. "Hi," Paige said. "Can I come in?" "Of course." He stepped back to let her enter. They stood in his living room with its spectacular view of the city lights, and Paige felt the words tumbling out. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry for making your money into this big, insurmountable problem when really it's my own insecurity and fear. You've never made me feel less than you. You've only ever treated me with respect and kindness, and I've been so focused on our financial differences that I wasn't appreciating what we actually have together." Yates moved closer, his eyes searching her face. "Paige, I need you to understand something. Yes, I have money. But I've also had plenty of relationships where that money was all the other person cared about. I've had women pretend to be interested in me when they were really interested in what I could buy them. I've had friends who only wanted to know me because of my connections. You're the first person in years who looked at me and saw just a person, not a bank account. That's why I fell in love with you, and that's why it hurts so much when you reduce our relationship to financial disparity. I know. You're right, and I'm sorry." Paige moved closer too, until they were only a few inches apart. "I do see you as just a person. A wonderful, kind, frustrating person who I am absolutely in love with. And I don't want to lose you because I'm too proud or too scared to accept that you want to share your life with me, including the financial parts." "So what are you saying?" Yates asked quietly. "I'm saying yes to Florida. Yes to meeting your father. Yes to letting you pay for things without making it into a fight. And yes to trying to build a life together without letting money be the thing that defines us." Yates pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I love you so much," he said into her hair. "And I promise, Paige, I will never make you feel like the money matters more than you do." "I love you too," Paige whispered. "I'm sorry I almost ruined this." "You didn't ruin anything. We just had to work through something difficult." He pulled back to look at her. "We're going to have more difficult conversations. That's what happens in relationships. But we'll work through them together, okay? Okay." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Paige felt all the tension of the past few days melting away. They spent the rest of the evening on his couch, talking through their fears and making promises to communicate better, to not let problems fester, to remember that they were on the same team. The trip to Florida, the following month, was wonderful. Paige met Yates's father, a warm man named George who told embarrassing stories about young Yates and treated Paige like she was already part of the family. She met George's wife, a kind woman named Linda who taught third grade and shared Paige's love of the ocean. They spent days on the beach, and Paige told Yates all about different marine species while he listened with genuine interest. "You should go back to school," he said one evening as they watched the sunset. "Finish your degree in marine biology. You light up when you talk about it." "Maybe someday," Paige said. "Right now I'm focused on paying off debt and building my savings." "What if I helped you pay for school?" Paige felt her old instinct to refuse rising up, but she pushed it down. They had talked about this. "Can we compromise? What if I save for another year, and then if I'm in a more stable place, we can talk about school? That way I'm contributing too, and it doesn't feel like you're just handing me an education." "I can work with that," Yates agreed. "Though I'm going to argue that investing in your education would be the smartest thing I could do with my money." "Charmer," Paige said, but she was smiling. Back in New York, life continued. Paige got promoted to senior property coordinator with a salary increase that made saving for school feel more achievable. She and Yates fell into comfortable routines, spending nights at each other's places, cooking dinner together, navigating the normal ups and downs of a relationship. She became friends with his sister Rebecca, who visited frequently and declared Paige to be the best thing that ever happened to her brother. Yates became close with Paige's college roommate Sarah, who had stuck by her through everything and approved wholeheartedly of the relationship. 1 year after they met, Yates took Paige back to the Gramercy Hotel. They sat in the same booth where they had first shared coffee, and Yates reached across the table to take her hand. "A year ago, I walked into this hotel and found a woman standing in the lobby, dripping wet and trying to figure out what to do next. I asked if she was okay, and she said yes, even though she clearly wasn't. And for some reason, I couldn't walk away. I had to know more about this person who held her head high even when everything was falling apart." "Yates," Paige said, her heart starting to pound. "Let me finish," he said, smiling. "This year with you has been the best year of my life. You've challenged me and supported me and made me laugh and made me think. You've shown me what it means to be with someone who loves me for who I am, not what I have. And I want to spend the rest of my life with you." He pulled out a small velvet box and opened it to reveal a simple but stunning diamond ring. "Paige Williams, will you marry me?" Paige's vision blurred with tears. "Yes," she managed. "Yes, absolutely yes." The ring fit perfectly, and when Yates kissed her, the other diners in the restaurant broke into applause. Paige laughed through her tears, happier than she ever thought possible. They planned a small wedding for the following spring, just family and close friends at a venue overlooking the ocean. Paige wore a simple white dress that she picked out herself and paid for with her own savings, which felt important even though Yates never made an issue of it. She walked down the aisle to where Yates waited, looking handsome in a dark gray suit, his eyes wet with emotion. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me," he said during his vows. "You've taught me that what matters in life isn't money or success or status. It's finding someone who sees you for who you really are and loves you anyway. It's building a life with someone who challenges you to be better. It's waking up every morning grateful that you found each other. I promise to love you, support you, and stand by your side through everything life brings us." Paige's vows were equally heartfelt. "A year and a half ago, I was standing in a hotel lobby, convinced that my life was falling apart and that I would never be more than barely surviving. Then you asked if I was okay, and everything changed. You showed me that I deserved kindness and respect and love. You never let me give up on myself or my dreams. You taught me that class and money don't define people, that what matters is character and heart. I promise to love you for exactly who you are, to build a life with you based on trust and respect and partnership, and to remind you every day that you made the right choice when you stopped to talk to that dripping wet woman in the hotel lobby. They exchanged rings and were pronounced husband and wife, and Paige felt like her heart might burst with joy. The reception was held on the beach, with dinner under string lights and dancing on the sand. Paige's friends mingled with Yates's family and business associates, and for once, Paige didn't feel out of place. She was exactly where she belonged. During their first dance, Yates pulled her close and whispered, "Happy." "Incredibly," Paige said. "Though I still can't quite believe this is my life." "Better get used to it, Mrs. Norton, because I plan on spending the next 60 years making you even happier." True to his word, Yates helped Paige enroll in online classes to finish her undergraduate degree. She balanced work and school, and Yates supported her through late-night study sessions and exam stress. 2 years after their wedding, she graduated with her bachelor's degree in marine biology, and Yates threw her a party that rivaled their wedding reception. "I'm so proud of you," he said, watching her show off her diploma to their guests. "What's next?" "Graduate school," Paige said. "I want to get my master's degree and eventually work in ocean conservation. There's a program at Columbia that focuses on marine policy and management that I've been looking at." "Then let's make it happen." Paige applied and was accepted, and for the next 3 years, she immersed herself in her studies. Yates adjusted his work schedule to support her, taking fewer business trips and working from home more often so they could have dinner together. He listened to her talk about marine ecosystems and conservation challenges, and even started incorporating sustainable practices into his property developments. When Paige graduated with her master's degree, she was offered a position with an ocean conservation nonprofit that worked on policy advocacy and education programs. The salary was modest compared to what she had been making at Norton Property Group, but the work was meaningful, and Yates never once suggested she should stay in the more lucrative job. "Do what makes you happy," he said simply. "We're more than financially secure, and I want you to love what you do." 5 years into their marriage, they bought a house in Connecticut with enough land for a garden and close enough to the water that Paige could kayak in the mornings before work. It was smaller and more modest than Yates could have afforded, but Paige had asked for something that felt like a home rather than a showpiece, and he had agreed without hesitation. They talked about children, about the life they wanted to build together, about dreams and plans and hopes. Money still came up occasionally, especially when Yates wanted to donate large sums to Paige's nonprofit or buy something extravagant. But they had learned how to talk about it openly without it becoming a fight. Paige had made peace with the fact that her husband was wealthy, and Yates had learned to understand why Paige needed to contribute financially to their life together, even when it wasn't strictly necessary. On their 7th wedding anniversary, they were sitting on their back porch watching the sunset when Paige made an announcement. "I'm pregnant." Yates's face went through about 6 different emotions in 2 seconds before landing on pure joy. "Really? Are you sure?" "Very sure." "I took 3 tests this morning." Paige laughed at his expression. "Are you happy?" "Happy, Paige, I'm ecstatic." He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was something precious. "We're going to have a baby." "We're going to have a baby," she repeated, and felt the truth of it settle into her bones. Their daughter, Emma Rose Norton, was born on a bright spring morning, and Yates cried when the nurse placed her in his arms. "She's perfect," he whispered. "Paige, she's absolutely perfect." "She really is," Paige agreed, exhausted and overwhelmed and more in love than she had known was possible. Watching Yates with their daughter over the following months was a revelation. He was gentle and patient and completely devoted, changing diapers and walking the floor at 3 in the morning and singing silly songs to make Emma smile. He arranged his work schedule around Paige's so that one of them was always home with Emma, and he never once complained about the sleepless nights or the chaos a baby brought to their previously orderly life. "You're an amazing father," Paige told him one evening, watching him read a picture book to 6-month-old Emma, who was more interested in trying to eat the pages. "I learned from the best," Yates said. "My parents showed me what it means to put your kids first, and your mother showed you that strength and love can get you through anything. We're just passing that on to Emma." When Emma was 2, they had a son they named Jacob, and their house filled with toys and laughter and the beautiful chaos of family life. Paige continued her work in ocean conservation, eventually becoming the director of education programs for her nonprofit. Yates remained successful in real estate, but became much more selective about his projects, focusing on sustainable development and affordable housing initiatives that made a real difference in communities. They taught their children about money early, explaining that they were fortunate to have financial security, but that money didn't make them better than anyone else. They taught them about kindness and hard work and standing up for what was right. They made sure Emma and Jacob understood that their mother had overcome significant challenges to build her career, and that perseverance and determination mattered more than circumstances. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Yates and Paige left the kids with Rebecca and took a trip back to New York City. They stayed at the Gramercy Hotel, in a suite much nicer than the lobby where they had met, and walked through the city holding hands like they had all those years ago. "Do you ever think about how things might have gone differently?" Paige asked as they sat in the hotel cafe, the same one where they had shared that first coffee. "If you hadn't stopped to ask if I was okay that night." "All the time," Yates admitted. "I think about how close I came to just walking past you, how easy it would have been to mind my own business. And then I think about everything I would have missed. You, our life together, Emma and Jacob. It makes me grateful every day that I made the choice to stop and talk to the woman dripping rainwater on the marble floor." "I almost didn't let you buy me coffee," Paige said. "I was so sure you had some ulterior motive, that nobody did kind things without expecting something in return." "I did have an ulterior motive," Yates said with a smile. "I wanted to keep talking to you because you were the most interesting person I had met in years. Totally selfish reasons." Paige laughed. "I'm glad you were selfish then." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Yates said, "You know what I love most about our story? It's not that I helped you when you were struggling or that we overcame financial differences or any of that. It's that we both chose each other every day, even when it was hard. We chose to work through our issues instead of walking away. We chose to build something together. That's what makes us work." "That's very wise," Paige said. "When did you get so wise?" "I married a marine biologist. Some of her intelligence must have rubbed off on me." "Definitely not how that works." "Close enough." Yates reached for her hand across the table, the same gesture he had made so many times over the years. "I love you, Paige Norton. Thank you for saying yes to coffee all those years ago." "Thank you for asking," Paige said. "Thank you for seeing past the broke, dripping wet waitress to the person I could become with support and love. Thank you for never making me feel like my lack of money made me less than you. And thank you for building this beautiful life with me." "Best investment I ever made," Yates said, and they both laughed. They returned home to their children and their busy life, to school projects and work deadlines and family dinners and bedtime routines. They continued to navigate the challenges that came with Yates's wealth, making decisions about how to use their resources in ways that felt ethical and meaningful. They taught their children about privilege and responsibility, about giving back and standing up for others. Years passed, and Emma and Jacob grew into thoughtful, kind teenagers who volunteered at local charities and treated everyone with respect, regardless of their background. Paige's career flourished as she helped implement conservation programs that protected marine habitats up and down the coast. Yates's company became known for innovative sustainable development projects that balanced profitability with social responsibility. On their 25th wedding anniversary, they renewed their vows on the same beach where they had married, surrounded by family and friends and their now adult children. Emma had just finished her first year of college studying environmental science, and Jacob was preparing to start his own undergraduate degree in architecture, planning to focus on sustainable urban design. 25 years, Yates said during the ceremony. 25 years of marriage to the woman who changed my life. When I met Paige, I was successful by most measures, but I was missing something essential. I was missing someone who saw me for who I really was, not what I had or what I could provide. Paige taught me that the best things in life aren't things at all. They're moments and relationships and love. She taught me that class and money mean nothing compared to character and heart, and she gave me a life richer than any bank account could provide. Paige's voice was thick with emotion when she spoke. 25 years ago, I told Yates that he was too rich for me, that we lived in different worlds that couldn't be bridged. I was so wrong. Class never mattered to him, not for a single moment. He loved me when I was a broke waitress with nothing to offer but myself. He supported me through school and career changes and the chaos of raising children. He built a partnership with me based on respect and equality, despite the financial disparity that I worried so much about in the beginning. Yates, you showed me that love transcends circumstances, that two people from different backgrounds can create something beautiful together if they're willing to work for it. Thank you for 25 years of proving me wrong in the best possible way. They kissed while their children cheered and their friends applauded, and Paige felt the same flutter in her chest that she had felt that first night in the hotel lobby when Yates had asked if she was okay. That evening, after the celebration had ended and they were alone in their hotel room, Yates pulled Paige onto the balcony to watch the stars over the ocean. "Happy anniversary, my love," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Happy anniversary," Paige replied, leaning back against his chest. 25 years. How did we get so lucky? I don't think it was luck. I think it was two people who were brave enough to take a chance on each other, despite all the reasons it might not work. You were brave enough to accept help when you needed it. I was brave enough to open my heart to someone who didn't care about my money. We were both brave enough to work through our issues instead of giving up. That's not luck, that's choice. Paige turned in his arms to face him. I choose you, Yates Norton. Today and every day, I choose this life we built together with all its complications and joys. And I choose you, Paige Norton, forever and always. They stood on the balcony holding each other as the waves crashed against the shore below. Two people from different worlds who had found their way to each other and built something lasting. The money that had once seemed like such an insurmountable obstacle now felt like background noise. Just one small facet of a life filled with so much more meaning. In the end, Paige realized, it had never been about the money at all. It had been about finding someone who loved her not despite her circumstances, but because of who she was as a person. It had been about learning to accept love and support without feeling diminished. It had been about building a partnership based on mutual respect and shared values rather than financial parity. Class had never mattered to Yates, just as he had tried to tell her from the beginning. And eventually, it had stopped mattering to Paige too. What mattered was the family they had created, the life they had built, the love they shared. What mattered was the choice they made every day to stand together, to support each other, to keep choosing each other through all of life's challenges. Their love story had started with a chance encounter on a rainy night, with a man asking a simple question and a woman brave enough to accept kindness from a stranger. And it had bloomed into something beautiful, something lasting, something that proved that love really could transcend any obstacle when two people were committed to making it work. As they watched the stars reflected in the dark water, Paige thought about that frightened, broke woman standing in the hotel lobby 16 years ago, certain that her life was falling apart. She wished she could go back and tell that woman that everything was going to be okay, that the man walking toward her with kind green eyes was going to change her life in ways she couldn't imagine. That love was coming, and hope, and a future brighter than any she could envision in that moment of despair. But maybe that woman hadn't needed to know. Maybe she had just needed to be brave enough to say yes to coffee with a stranger, and everything else had unfolded from that single moment of courage. "What are you thinking about?" Yates asked softly. "How grateful I am," Paige said. "How lucky I am that you stopped to talk to me that night. How blessed I am to have this life with you." "The gratitude is mutual," Yates assured her. "You gave me everything I never knew I needed. You gave me love and family and purpose. You made me a better man." "We made each other better," Paige corrected. "That's what love does." They stayed on the balcony until the night grew cold, then went inside to the warmth of their hotel room, their hands still clasped together. 25 years of marriage, and Yates still reached for her hand the way he had that first night. 25 years of partnership, and they still chose each other every day. It was, Paige thought as she fell asleep in her husband's arms, the greatest love story she could have imagined. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Not because they never struggled, but because they struggled together. Not because money didn't matter, but because they had learned what really did matter and built their life around those truths. In the end, the rain-soaked woman and the millionaire had found their way to each other, had overcome their obstacles, had created something beautiful together. And they had learned the most important lesson of all, that class and wealth mean nothing compared to love, respect, and the courage to build a life with someone who sees you for exactly who you are.